What is up, mere mortals? My name is John Solo. Have you ever wondered what happens to humans after we die? Of course you have. It's a mystery that's plagued our puny brains since we were doodling on cave walls, and I'm willing to bet that every one of you watching this video has a slightly different idea of what's awaiting us on the other side. Some probably believe there's a land full of fluffy clouds and comfy white robes for us to relax in. Others might claim there's complete darkness or even eternal torment, but I'm here to tell you that you're all wrong. At least according to the Vikings. Because in Norse mythology, there are beings called Valkyries which play a tremendously important role in the afterlife. Servants of Odin himself, these women choose whose soul will go on to live a blissful existence in Valhalla, drinking ale, singing songs, and training for their final fight at Ragnarok, when the end of the world is finally upon us. Now, you've probably seen Valkyries portrayed in pop culture before in games like God of War and movies like Thor Ragnarok. But just how accurate to the mythos are these depictions, and what dark details are they quietly choosing to leave out? Today we're going to answer those questions by scrounging up every scrap of info we can from our Norse resources and comparing their quite disturbing role in the original mythos with their much more tame portrayals in the modern day. One of the most surprising things about Valkyries is that despite them being such an iconic part of Norse mythology, we really don't have that much info about them. Admittedly, that's a pretty common challenge when researching anything from the Norse mythos. Because so many of the Norse traditions were passed on orally, we're always working with fragments and analyzing myths that don't give us proper context. But what makes Valkyries different from the figures and events that we've talked about in the past is there aren't many stories or poems that give them enough spotlight to flesh out our conception of them. Most of the time, they're making brief appearances in the background or are mentioned in passing. So for this episode, we collected all the info we could from our usual resources like the Prose Edda, Poetic Edda, and even some lesser known poems to paint as complete a picture as possible. And the results are both fascinating and disturbing. But let's start with the tame stuff and work our way into the nightmare-inducing part, shall we? What exactly are Valkyries and what do they do? Well, believe it or not, Thor Ragnarok doesn't get the Valkyries completely wrong from a mythology standpoint. They really are badass warrior women who specifically serve Odin and ride on winged steeds. But those steeds aren't always horses. They can also ride on wolves and boars, the two animals I would least want to see flying towards me. Despite their elevated status though, Valkyries were not considered gods. As a matter of fact, they were born as mortal women. We don't know if the Valkyries were chosen by Odin or if it was their destiny right from birth, but in one poem, the Valkyrie Brunhild, who's the namesake for Marvel's Valkyrie Brunhilde, says that a brave king ordered the feathered cloaks of us 8 Valkyries to be carried underneath an oak. I was 12 years old, if you want to know, when I gave the young prince my oath. Initiation at 12 years old. That's pretty young. But there's still reason to believe that Valkyries had somewhat normal childhoods, maybe even privileged ones, because they were exclusively described as snake-eyed, pale women with bright hair, all qualities that were attributed to the ever-desirable upper-class broads who never had to work in the unforgiving summer heat. It's also said that Valkyries can communicate with birds, an ability they put to use often when they speak with Odin's ravens Hugin and Munin and pass along information to keep the Allfather updated about goings-on in the 9 realms. The Valkyries' weapon of choice was the spear, and their armor, which is often referred to as their swan skin or feathered cloaks, resembled bird feathers, and there were wings attached to the back of the armor. So as long as they were wearing it, they didn't necessarily need their steeds if they had to fly somewhere. In God of War, the Valkyrie's wings are part of her body, making these finishing moves that much more brutal. But check this out. According to Norse myth, if the Valkyries weren't wearing their armor, it could be stolen by a man. And if it was hidden well enough, she would fall under a spell where she would marry and have babies with him. If she did eventually find her armor, she would vanish, and the man would have to complete 1 or more labors to prove himself worthy and win her back. And going through these labors would cause him to grow from a mere man to a hero, and thus make him worthy of being her partner. So, in a way, they both get their happily ever after. Another important note is that despite their beauty, Valkyries were never thought of as sex objects or damsels in distress. Their armor being stolen or destroyed was the only occasion where they would be in a romantic relationship. That shouldn't be a surprise though when you consider what their job is. Even the title of Valkyrie has a gruesome meaning. The literal translation is dead body on a battlefield chooser, but the more poetic phrasing most people go with is chooser of the slain. This title has a double meaning too. See, after a battle is over and after the goddess Freya has chosen which half of the dead are going to her realm of the afterlife, a hall called folklore, the Valkyries walk among the slain and choose which warriors are worthy of joining Odin in Valhalla and fighting alongside him at Ragnarok. That may not have always been their purpose though, considering that the concept of Valhalla, a hall for the spirits of fallen warriors, was a later development in the Norse mythos. There's reason to believe that Valkyries were originally monstrous women who feasted on the dead and then brought their souls to the afterlife. Some scholars theorize that the evolution of Norse culture, specifically their ideas about death and women playing a bigger role on the battlefield, led to Valkyries evolving into the epitome of feminine beauty and masculine strength. Whether they're eating the bodies or not, their role as soul escorts is the most well-known aspect of the Valkyries' responsibilities. Just like Hermes from Greek mythology and the Egyptian deity Anubis, they're what's called psychopomps, guides to recently deceased souls. However, what most people don't realize is that Valkyries also choose who is going to die in battle before it even begins, almost as if they were the Norns, the Norse weavers of fate. There's even a poem called Daratharljoth where a man has a vision of 12 women working on a loom in front of a stone hut. And that loom is made from entrails, arrows, and spears. They use intestines for their thread, severed heads for weights, and swords and arrows for beaters. The reason we know these 12 horrifying women are Valkyries is because they say it themselves. While working at the loom, they chant with excitement about choosing the fates of the men who are about to fight in the Battle of Clontarf. And I've just gotta say that if the Valkyries chose me to die and then passed me up for going to Valhalla, I would be pissed. Oh, come on, you're gonna pick that guy over me? He barely has a scratch on him. I lost both my hands for this shit. We'll never be 100% certain about the exact number of Valkyries there are because different poems give different figures. Some say 8, others say 12, one says 300. That being said, there are a few notable Valkyries among the countless warrior women. In the poem Grimnismal, Odin gives us 13 names, none of which I can pronounce, but they translate to some of the most metal monikers I've ever heard. Shake, Mist, Axe Gauge, Projector, Battle, Strength, Cry of an Eagle, Warfetter, Noise, Spear Projector, Shield Eager, Advice Eager, and Divine Survivor. If I ever start a career in professional wrestling, I know where I'm getting my stage name from. While each and every Valkyrie is a badass in her own right, there is one who reigns supreme, the goddess of love, death, and fertility, Freya. Remember, she has first dibs on the dead after a battle and picks who she wants in her realm. That shows that she's the supreme psychopomp, so it makes sense that they'd make her the Valkyrie Queen and God of War.
There has only been one queen of the Valkyries, the goddess Freya.
As important as Freya is though, she's actually not the most famous. That title belongs to the Valkyrie I mentioned earlier, Brunhild, and similar to the Marvel character named after her, she's kind of a tragic figure. Her full story can be found in the 13th century Old Norse poem called the Volsunga Saga, but we're looking at a much shorter and more straightforward version in the Skaldskaparmal chapter of the Prose Edda. The myth, which has a lot in common with Sleeping Beauty, picks up right after Sigurd, the supposed hero of the story, pulls a Prince Philip and slays a dragon. After the fight, he rides his horse up a mountain where he finds a small house with a beautiful armored woman sleeping inside of it. Realizing that she's under a spell, he uses his sword to cut the armor off her, causing her to wake up and introduce herself to her savior. Her name was Brunhild, and she was a Valkyrie. Fans of fairy tales would expect this to be the moment where the two embrace each other and live happily ever after, but instead, Sigurd just gets back on his horse and rides away. Then, sometime later, he rides with his friend Gunnar to Brunhild's brother to ask for her hand in marriage. But her brother tells them she's moved into a new house that's surrounded by a ring of fire and has sworn that she'll only marry a man who's brave enough to jump through the flames. Well, neither Gunnar nor his horse are willing to take such a risk, but Sigurd is the ultimate wingman. After disguising himself as Gunnar, Sigurd leaps through the flames, proposes to Brunhild, and she says yes. But remember, she doesn't realize that brave Gunnar is fake Gunnar and the real one is a total She doesn't learn the truth for a while either, but one day when she's bathing in the river with Sigurd's wife Gudrun, the two women get into an argument about whose husband is braver, causing Gudrun to reveal the whole scheme, and Brunhild is furious. She tries to convince Gunnar to kill Sigurd as revenge, but the two had taken an oath to be blood brothers, so Gunnar convinces his actual brother, Guthorm, to kill him instead. But the assassination didn't exactly go as planned. Guthorm was able to get the jump on Sigurd and stab him in the chest while he was sleeping, but before Sigurd bled out, he fought back and used his sword to slice Guthorm in half. Then, when Brunhild heard the deed was done and that Sigurd, the only man whose bravery was worthy of her love, was dead, she was so heartbroken that she couldn't live with her regret and stabbed herself in the chest. Then her body was burned in Sigurd's funeral pyre. So I guess when you look at the literal details, the Brunhild in Norse myth isn't that similar with Brunhilde in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but both did tragically lose the people they loved most and didn't find the healthiest ways of handling it.
He's mine.
In that Solo Fam was the messed up origins of Valkyries, from corpse-devouring she-demons to lovely lady warriors. Now I just want to know, have you checked out the Messed Up Origins podcast yet? If not, you really should. We're posting remastered and enhanced versions of all our classic episodes every Monday and Wednesday morning. So hit the links in the description to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and stay on the lookout for podcast exclusive episodes, which will be showing up before long. I'll see you all again next week when I dive into the truly dark, truly disturbing, truly messed up origins of none other than Percy Jackson. Until then, my name is John Solo, and remember, John shot first.